So, we thought about God being near, and then we have this psalm. O Lord, you have searched me and you know me. You know when I sit and when I rise, you perceive my thoughts from afar. You discern my going out and my lying down. You know it completely, O Lord. Bit frightening, really, isn't it? The fact that God is so near to this psalmist. I love this psalm in the fact that it's like that hymn we have just sung, because it's about how we are, how God sees us, and how God is near. And this psalmist says, where can I go away from you? Where can I flee from your presence? If I go up to the heavens, you're there. If I make my bed in the depths, you're there. So you can't escape God. We had the bucket we threw balls in, but that somehow or other is about how near God is and how we miss the mark so often because we don't realise he is so near. And this psalmist knows that he is really near. There is a bit that's not so good that we usually leave out. But the last two verses say, search me, God, and know my heart. Test me and know my anxious thoughts. See if there is any offensive way in me, and lead me in the way everlasting. I just love the thoughts of that, really, with regard to everything that's happening. So, when we come to different things, we wonder as we get older whether somehow or other the things that happen to us are what God sent, what God tests, or that the fact that whatever comes along, we mustn't lose track of where God is. These readings, the ones from the New Testament, from Luke, is about Jesus telling stories because people are criticizing the fact that he spends his time with tax gatherers, ladies of ill repute, and all the other things that the church, through the Pharisees and everyone else, looked down upon because they thought that they were irredeemable. You didn't touch them because if you did, you were contaminated. And so when we think about what Jesus was saying, he wasn't saying that loss might be irredeemable. If you smash a cup or a plate, you can't put it back together again unless it's worth an awful lot of money. A failed relationship or a life ends, and there's no way back. Parable today is not necessary to talk about this kind of loss, but it sits in the framework of that shows God's power to create spaces of new beginning. The outcome of many losses is not restoration of the status quo, though through finding what it was lost, but finding new ways of acting and living with God's gift of creativity and imagination, which helps us to be compassionate about our loss. You see, whenever we think about all the things that are going on, we sometimes wonder whether what we'd have is what we might always have, or does things change? Our relationship with God changes. I can remember I was brought up as an Anglican, and I was asked to be, I didn't think our church was that high, but I was asked to be a little lad, dressed up in a surplice and everything else, to carry a candle. And I started doing that when I was 7. And carried on doing it when it was my turn to do it. And when I started, I found what we had to wear so hot that halfway through I'd keel over and have to be taken out. I think I did it really because I didn't think much of Sunday school, and if I did this, I got out of going to that. I don't know that that's right, really. But when I was 13 or 14, suddenly God seemed very real to me. So it was all arranged that we had lessons and things to tell us what we should and shouldn't think. And then the bishop came and confirmed us. And if you wonder why I came into the Methodist church, I married a Methodist, and when we first got married, the nearest church was the church we got married in. And I thought it was not very good to start off a marriage by me going to one church and my wife going to another one. So I went along to the Methodist church, and after a little while the minister talked to me and said, "It's no different, you know, it's no different at all. You still worship the same God, it's just you won't get communion every week." So and when it came to me thinking about being a local preacher, I don't know how it came into my head, but it takes us to be moved, because I work for Boots, so I got moved around, and for our twin sons to be born, when I decided that, yes, I would become a Methodist local preacher, which isn't an easy thing to start or complete. But that's me, and I'm only saying that because that's the way God talked to me and called me. And when God calls, we don't always listen, or we put it off, or all sorts of things. I put it off for some time until everything came together. Now, what I want to ask you is, how much do you pay for a bottle of water in East Grinstead? Sorry?
I get it from the tap.
Well, yes, okay. So sometimes you've got to pay for a bottle of water. What would it be? Sorry?
£1.25.
£1.25. Thank you very much. 99. I think they're cheaper if you buy 6 or something. But I only bought 1. I only bought 1 because you're telling me how much I pay in East Grinstead. How much would I pay at the railway station? Probably a little bit more. How much would I pay at the airport? Probably about £5. And so it changes in value according to where you get it. It's the same stuff, it's water in a bottle. I don't often buy it. I've got a bottle that I refill. It's not a plastic one. So if this is worth £5 at the airport, how much more do we cost? You'd say, well, I've got to buy food, I've got to buy this and that and whatever. I need a new chair or whatever. And so we go on like that. But what I'm saying is that this bottle of water varies in price according to where you found it. But to God, each of you is valueless. Each of you is worth so very much more to God and to the people around you. You will know people who, your neighbours, friends, your family, and when we are out, we find that, I suppose, our family are the people that we know best. They might not live with you anymore, like mine, and they're in different places. Thankfully, they're not in New Zealand or Australia, but one lives in Bristol, one lives down near Bournemouth, and my daughter lives in Ifield, so she's nearest. And so we have 4 grandchildren, all of which are part of the family. Now, as we reach out, we get to know other people in our church, if we go to church, or we get to know other people in the things that we might go to in the week. If you're still at work, you get to know people who are at work. You might all meet up occasionally or whatever, like a family would. But there are times when you are somewhere, say on a train, on a bus, or wherever, where you are surrounded by people who you don't know. So, how do they know you're a Christian? Is it the way that you are with people? Are you concerned about people that you don't know? And how do you value those other people? You see, we meet lots of people. We'll go in the bank and meet people in there who work there. We'll go in the shops and meet people who are there. But in a shop, you're surrounded by people you don't know. And unless you bump into somebody you do know in the shop, you'll go shopping and it'll all happen and you'll walk out. But if you go to, I don't know what you have here during the week, young wives or men's fellowship or whatever you might have, you will get to know other people. And if you belong to a club, I confess that I'm a railway nut, so I belong to a railway club, and I go there and there's another group of people who I've become friends with because their thoughts or whatever they're interested in is perhaps the same as me. So why am I saying all this? Because when we are out, when we are at work, how do people know that you are a Christian? And I think the answer, in some respect, is the way that you treat people, the way that you speak to people, the way that you, if you like, react to people. If you're a Christian, I don't suppose you swear. If you're a Christian, I expect you look after people who you might meet if they feel a bit unwell or whatever. And sometimes we think about ourselves. And of all these people, God values each one. He values each of you because that's how you are, because you're Christian people. And the people who met at 9 o'clock this morning are Christian people, though even though you may or may not know them. But they are part of the church. And each church has a congregation, and each church is part of either the Methodist church or the Anglican church or whatever. We have an Anglican church at the end of our road, and I must say that occasionally I go there. Occasionally I go if they've got a special service or whatever. And somehow or other, because we live in the same road, I suppose, we know some of the people who go to that church. So what I'm saying is, when we are at work, when we are anywhere, the way we look out at people is the way that comes to us. You see, with the bucket, we tried to get balls in a bucket, thinking that whatever we did was near to God. If we missed, that's what happens during the week, when despite all the things that have come to us as Christians, sometimes we fail. Sometimes we fall apart. Sometimes things happen and we think, oh gosh, and we want to do it on our own. But so often, if we acknowledge God is there, somehow or other, it doesn't seem quite so bad. So, I suppose, as we react with people, and we realise, as was said earlier, how valuable we are and how valuable the surroundings are. And we are a gift from God because we've got to know him through the power of the Holy Spirit. We've got to know him because we've read the Bible and worked at it. But the people outside, the people you will meet this week, don't know perhaps that you go to church. But do they know somehow or other what you are like and what you do? In my work, because I had to care for people and care for staff as a boot store manager, people gradually realised that I had a faith. In fact, one particular lady asked me and started to come to the Methodist church. And I never said anything. It was just the way that I was and the way that I cared for people. And I think that when we look around us at the wonderful creation that God has made, and we are mucking it up by all the emissions of all the cars and all the sort of emissions of everything else, that we've got global warming, and in a way, it's all our fault. But when you look back, a long, long way, according to what was said, there have been warm periods of the earth, and there have been cold periods as well. I can remember still going to school in 1963, walking 2 miles to school because the snow was so thick, you only had to walk. And these days, if that happened, they'd shut the schools. In those days, somehow or other the teachers got there and we still had school. And then we walked home. I can remember, those road signs that stick up, got a triangle on the top. I can remember seeing the top little bit of that triangle, the rest was surrounded by a snowdrift. And we don't have those sorts of winters anymore. But one day, when we are honest with ourselves, we realize that all the things we do sometimes cause those emissions. And so we have to work at that. And we have to work at being a Christian, because like the bottle, the bucket, the bottle, and the worth, you as Christian people are so, so valuable to God. And in the readings from the New Testament, we saw how someone who was lost, it was the coin or the sheep, and the sheep wanders off and gets lost. The coin gets lost and they look, and because they're so filled with the fact that they have found their loss, they want to celebrate that loss. And that Jesus is telling them that all the people who don't need to know God, don't already know God, we're there for God. What the parables tell us is that the people that you talk to and bring to God somehow or other, because you don't have to say anything, it's just the way that you are and the way that you need to be. And you will find that people will understand that knowing God is special. Knowing God is so much better than not knowing. But there are lots of people out there in East Grinstead, there are lots of people out there in Red Hill, which is my normal church, who don't know about church or God. You ask them about church, they'll say, oh, it's deadly boring, you don't want to go there. And sometimes people come and they don't feel they fit in, and they might go to another church. And we have to understand that that might well happen. So what I'm trying to say really is, like this is worth different amounts. You are worth so much more as people of God, as people who work to know God, as people who work to show their faith wherever they are. Amen.